Picture this, a crowded airport on a stormy night, passengers rushing to catch their flights, and a K-9 officer who notices something off. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than a well-dressed woman carrying a sleeping baby. But what unfolded next would reveal a sinister plot hiding in plain sight, and change lives forever. This is a story about instincts, bravery, and the power of paying attention to the details others might miss. It's a tale that will leave you questioning how much you really notice in your own life. If you're curious to see how one decision can unravel a dangerous secret, stay tuned, you won't want to look away. And if you're ready for more stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you never miss out. We'd also love to hear from you. What would you have done in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The wind howled like an angry beast outside Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, rattling the massive glass windows that separated the bustling terminal from the chaos of winter's fury. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with frustration and impatience. Flights delayed. Families restless. Suitcases scattered everywhere like abandoned toys. Melissa Rodriguez, tall, lean, with sharp brown eyes framed by her dark hair tucked under her K-9 officer cap, strode purposefully through the crowded concourse, her German Shepherd partner Luna at her side. Luna wasn't just any dog, she was a finely tuned instrument of detection, trained to sniff out danger where others saw only ordinary luggage or harmless passengers. Her sleek coat shimmered under the fluorescent lights as her nose twitched constantly, sampling the air for anything unusual. Melissa trusted Luna implicitly. They'd been partners for 3 years now, and not once had the dog let her down. "Rodriguez," came a gruff voice behind her. It was Supervisor Martinez, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his expression skeptical as always. "You sure you're not overdoing it? We've got enough on our plate without your hound causing a scene." Melissa turned to face him, her jaw tightening slightly but her tone calm and professional. "Sir, if Luna senses something off, I trust her instincts more than I trust half the equipment we've got here. You know that." Nez grunted, clearly unconvinced, but before he could say anything else, Luna froze mid-step. Her ears perked up sharply, and her body went rigid, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to snap. Melissa immediately stopped walking too, her hand instinctively resting on Luna's harness. Something had caught the dog's attention. Across the bustling terminal, near gate 27B, stood a woman who looked entirely out of place amidst the disarray. She wore a tailored navy blue coat, designer boots, and carried herself with an air of sophistication that seemed almost theatrical in contrast to the weary travelers around her. In her arms, swaddled in a soft pink blanket, was what appeared to be a sleeping infant. But there was something off about the way she held it. Too stiffly. Too deliberately. Luna's low growl began deep in her throat, barely audible above the din of the airport. Melissa glanced down at her partner, then followed her gaze to the woman. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. Yet when Melissa focused harder, details started to jump out, details that didn't quite add up. The woman's movements were jerky, unnatural. She avoided making eye contact with anyone nearby, instead staring fixedly ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line. And the baby, in her arms, it hadn't moved once since Melissa noticed them. Not even a twitch. Luna's growl grew louder, escalating into sharp, insistent barks that cut through the noise of the terminal like a knife. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Passengers stared, some confused, others alarmed. The woman flinched visibly, clutching the bundle in her arms tighter. For a split second, panic flashed across her face, but just as quickly, she masked it, forcing a strained smile as though trying to appear unfazed. "What's going on?" James Dawkins, another senior security officer, approached from the opposite direction. His salt and pepper hair and lined face spoke of decades spent dealing with crises both big and small. He eyed the scene warily, his hand resting on the radio clipped to his belt. "Rodriguez? Your dog causing trouble again?" "No, Sir, Melissa replied firmly, never taking her eyes off the woman. Luna's picked up on something. That woman, there's something wrong with her behavior. Dawkins frowned, glancing toward the woman in question. She looks fine to me. Just another stressed-out traveler trying to keep her kid calm during this mess. But Melissa shook her head. Watch her hands, she said quietly. They're gripping that blanket too tightly. And look at the baby, it hasn't moved at all. Not even when Luna started barking. Dawkins squinted, studying the woman more closely. Sure enough, the so-called baby remained eerily still, its tiny form unnaturally rigid beneath the blanket. A chill ran down his spine, despite the warmth of the crowded terminal. All right, he muttered, reaching for his radio. Let's check it out. Better safe than sorry. As they began moving toward the woman, Melissa felt a surge of adrenaline. This was why she loved working with Luna. The dog's instincts were razor-sharp, and they'd saved lives more times than she could count. Still, there was no room for error here. If they acted too aggressively, they risked scaring innocent people. If they hesitated too long, they might miss something critical. The woman must have sensed their approach because she suddenly shifted, turning away as though preparing to leave. But Luna barked again, louder this time, drawing even more attention. Several passengers whipped out their phones, recording the unfolding drama. The woman's facade cracked further, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. She clutched the bundle closer, her knuckles white against the fabric of the blanket. "Ma'am," Melissa called out, raising her voice to be heard over the murmurs spreading through the crowd. "Please stop. We need to speak with you." For a moment, it seemed like the woman might bolt. Then, with visible reluctance, she stopped and turned to face them. Her eyes darted nervously between Melissa, Luna, and the growing group of security officers closing in around her. And that's when Melissa noticed it, the faintest tremor in the woman's hands, the subtlest hint of sweat beading on her forehead. Whatever, or whoever, was wrapped in that pink blanket, it wasn't a sleeping child. Melissa took a step forward, her voice calm but firm as she addressed the woman. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Rodriguez with Airport Security. Could you please tell me your name and where you're headed tonight?" The woman hesitated for just a fraction of a second before answering, her smile brittle and practiced. "Catherine Holt," she said, enunciating each word carefully, as though reciting lines from memory. "I'm flying to Chicago. My flight's been delayed because of the storm." Melissa nodded, keeping her expression neutral. She'd heard plenty of rehearsed answers in her time on the job, and something about this one rang false. The tone was too smooth, too deliberate. Even the way Catherine avoided making direct eye contact felt calculated, like she was trying to project innocence while avoiding scrutiny. "And the baby?" Melissa asked, gesturing toward the bundle in Catherine's arms. "Is everything okay? You seem nervous." Catherine's grip tightened noticeably around the blanket, her knuckles turning even whiter. "Oh, yes, she's fine," she replied quickly, almost too quickly. "Just sleeping. Long day for both of us." Luna growled again, low and menacing, her hackles rising. Her body language left no room for doubt, something wasn't right here. Melissa glanced down at her partner, then back up at Catherine. "May I see her?" she asked gently, taking another cautious step closer. Catherine flinched, shifting her weight uneasily. "No need for that," she said, forcing another strained smile. "She's perfectly fine." "Really?" By now, a small crowd had gathered, murmuring among themselves. Some watched curiously, others nervously. Supervisor Martinez stepped forward, his arms still crossed over his chest. He shot Melissa a sharp look. "Rodriguez, what's going on here? We don't have time for wild goose chases." Melissa clenched her jaw but kept her focus on Catherine. "Sir, Luna's behavior indicates there's something suspicious about this situation. I think we should investigate further." Nez sighed heavily, shaking his head. "Look, it's probably nothing. Let the woman go. We've got enough problems tonight without stirring up trouble over a tired mom and her kid." But Melissa couldn't shake the feeling in her gut, the same instinct that had guided her through countless high-pressure situations. Something wasn't adding up. She subtly tilted her head toward James Dawkins, who stood nearby observing silently. His weathered face betrayed no emotion, but he gave an almost imperceptible nod, signaling that he understood. They'd worked together long enough to communicate without words. Catherine, clearly growing more agitated by the second, glanced around as if searching for an escape route. That's when Luna moved, not aggressively, but decisively, stepping into Catherine's path and blocking her way. The dog's ears were pinned back, her teeth bared in a silent warning. Catherine froze, clutching the bundle tighter against her chest. "Please," Catherine pleaded, her voice trembling now. "I just want to get to my gate. I need to catch my flight." Melissa held up a hand, her tone softening slightly. "Ma'am, I understand you're anxious, but we need to clear this up first. It'll only take a moment." James stepped closer, his presence commanding yet non-threatening. "Ms. Holt, why don't you come with us to the security office? We can sort this out there." Catherine shook her head vehemently. No, I can't. I'll miss my flight." It was then that Melissa noticed something odd, a flicker of movement near the edge of the terminal. One of the security monitors mounted on the wall displayed footage from earlier in the evening. On screen, Catherine could be seen walking briskly through the concourse, her arms empty. No baby. No pink blanket. Just her designer coat and determined stride. Melissa's heart skipped a beat. She exchanged a quick glance with James, who nodded grimly. Without saying a word, he reached for his radio. "Control, this is Dawkins. Pull up all available camera feeds for Gate 27B. Priority alert." Catherine must have sensed the shift in momentum because she suddenly bolted, shoving past a group of startled passengers. But Luna was faster. With a fierce bark, the German shepherd lunged forward, cutting off her escape once again. This time, there was no mistaking the fear in Catherine's eyes as she stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her own feet. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice cracking under the strain. "Don't come any closer." Melissa raised her hands slightly, trying to defuse the tension. "Ma'am, please. Nobody has to get hurt. Just put the bundle down, and let's talk about this." For a moment, it seemed like Catherine might comply. Her arms trembled, and she glanced desperately at the exits, clearly weighing her options. Then, with a sudden burst of resolve, she tightened her grip on the blanket and muttered something under her breath, words Melissa couldn't quite catch. Behind them, the hum of activity in the terminal had given way to stunned silence. All eyes were on Catherine, on Luna, and on Melissa, who stood poised between them like a barrier holding back chaos. Whatever was hidden beneath that pink blanket, it wasn't a sleeping child. And everyone present knew it. Melissa's voice remained calm but firm as she continued her questioning. "Ms. Holt, I'm going to need to see your identification and the baby's travel documents," she said, taking another small step closer. Her hand hovered near Luna's harness, ready to intervene if necessary. Catherine hesitated, her lips parting as though searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, she stammered, I left them in my carry-on. It's over by Gate 27B. Melissa tilted her head slightly, studying Catherine's face. "You're traveling with an infant, ma'am. Surely you'd keep those documents on you?" "I thought I did," Catherine replied, her tone wavering between defensive and desperate. She glanced around again, her eyes darting toward the growing crowd of onlookers. Some were filming the scene with their phones, while others whispered nervously among themselves. The tension in the air was palpable. Officer James Dawkins moved closer now, his presence adding weight to the situation. His grizzled features softened slightly as he addressed Catherine. Ma'am, we're just trying to ensure everyone's safety here. If you'll cooperate, this will all be over quickly. Catherine nodded stiffly, clutching the bundle tighter against her chest. But something about her posture screamed unease. Her shoulders were rigid, and her breathing had become shallow and rapid. And then there was the baby, still completely motionless despite the escalating commotion around them. Not a whimper, not even a twitch. Even newborns stirred at loud noises or sudden movements, yet this one remained unervingly still. Luna growled again, low and guttural, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on Catherine. Melissa could feel the dog's muscles tense beneath her hand, ready to act at a moment's notice. Whatever was wrapped in that pink blanket, it wasn't human, or alive. Behind the scenes, the security team was quietly working to piece together more information. A young officer stationed near the monitors radioed in urgently. "Rodriguez, we've got something. Her ticket is under the name Catherine Miller, not Catherine Holt. And her ID photo doesn't match either." Melissa's heart raced. This wasn't just a case of nerves or a simple mix-up, something far more sinister was unfolding right before her eyes. She exchanged another quick glance with James, who gave a subtle nod. They were thinking the same thing, this woman was hiding something dangerous. "Ms. Holt," Melissa said, her tone sharpening slightly, "there seems to be a discrepancy with your identification. Can you explain why your ticket and ID don't match?" Catherine's face paled visibly, her composure cracking further. I must have made a mistake when booking the flight," she stammered, her voice trembling. "It happens sometimes, right? People make mistakes." James stepped forward now, his expression hardening. "Not like this, they don't. Ma'am, I'm afraid we're going to need you to come with us to the security office. We can sort this out there." "No!" Catherine snapped, her voice rising sharply. Several passengers nearby flinched at the sudden outburst. She took a step back, her grip on the bundle tightening so much that her knuckles turned white. "I told you, I'm fine. My baby's fine. Just let me go." But it was too late. The noose was tightening around her, and she knew it. With a panicked glance over her shoulder, she suddenly bolted, shoving past a group of startled travelers. The crowd gasped collectively as she sprinted toward the nearest exit, her designer boots clicking frantically against the tiled floor. Luna reacted instantly, lunging forward with a fierce bark that echoed through the terminal. Melissa shouted, "Stop her," as she and James gave chase, weaving through the throng of people who scrambled to get out of the way. Catherine reached the automatic doors leading outside, but before she could push through, Luna intercepted her once again, barking furiously and standing firmly in her path. Trapped, Catherine spun around, her eyes wide with panic. Behind her, the storm raged on, icy winds whipping through the open doorway. "Please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. You can't stop me." "We can, and we will," Melissa said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She took a cautious step forward, her hand resting reassuringly on Luna's back. "Put the bundle down, Ms. Holt. Now." For a long moment, Catherine stood frozen, her chest heaving as she weighed her options. Then, with a defeated sigh, she slowly lowered the bundle to the ground, but not before giving it one final, almost reverent squeeze. As soon as it hit the floor, the truth became horrifyingly clear. The baby wasn't a baby at all. It was a crudely shaped package wrapped in layers of fabric, its edges suspiciously angular beneath the blanket. Melissa crouched down carefully, her training kicking in as she examined it. There was no mistaking what she saw, a timer, blinking red numbers counting down steadily. "Bomb," someone shouted from the crowd, sending a ripple of terror through the terminal. Catherine's panic reached a fever pitch as she bolted through the terminal, shoving past startled passengers who barely had time to react. Her movements were frantic, almost animalistic, as she weaved through the crowded concourse like a cornered predator searching for an escape route. Suitcases toppled over, coffee cups spilled, and cries of alarm erupted from every direction. Melissa didn't hesitate. "Luna, go," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. The German Shepherd sprang into action, her powerful legs propelling her forward with precision and speed. She darted between luggage carts, leapt over abandoned bags, and avoided panicked travelers with uncanny agility. Behind her, Melissa and James pushed through the throng, their radios crackling urgently as backup was summoned. "Control, this is Rodriguez. We've got a suspect fleeing toward the south exit. Possible explosive device in hand. Seal all exits immediately." The woman, Catherine, glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes wild with desperation. Seeing Luna closing the gap, she redoubled her efforts, sprinting faster despite the awkward bundle clutched tightly against her chest. Passengers screamed and scattered as she barreled past them, some diving out of the way while others froze in shock. Ahead, security barriers stood in her path, a series of retractable stanchions connected by velvet ropes. Without slowing down, Catherine vaulted over one, sending it clattering to the ground behind her. The sound echoed sharply through the terminal, adding to the mounting tension. But even as she cleared the obstacle, Luna was already on her heels, barking furiously and gaining ground with each stride. James shouted into his radio, his voice gruff but controlled. "All units, converge on Sector C, suspect heading for Exit 7. Repeat, seal off Exit 7. Within moments, airport staff scrambled to comply. Security personnel stationed at key points throughout the terminal moved swiftly to block access to nearby exits. Metal gates slammed shut with a thunderous clang, trapping Catherine in an increasingly narrow maze of corridors. Still, she pressed on, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she veered into a service hallway that led deeper into the bowels of the airport. Melissa and James followed close behind, their footsteps pounding against the tiled floor. The corridor ahead was dimly lit, lined with maintenance doors and storage lockers. It was a dead end, but Catherine either didn't realize it or didn't care. Her only thought now was survival, though her options were rapidly dwindling. As they rounded the final bend, Melissa spotted her silhouetted against the harsh fluorescent lights at the end of the hall. There was nowhere left to run. The heavy steel door leading outside had been sealed shut, its electronic lock flashing red. Trapped, Catherine spun around, clutching the bundle closer to her chest. Her face was a mask of fear and regret, tears streaming down her cheeks as she backed up against the closed door. "Don't come any closer," she shrieked, her voice trembling with raw emotion. "Please, just stay back." Luna skidded to a halt several feet away, her teeth bared and a low growl rumbling deep in her throat. Melissa raised a hand, signaling for the dog to hold her position. She took a cautious step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Miss Holt," she said firmly, her tone steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, "it's over. You're not going anywhere." Catherine shook her head violently, her grip tightening on the bundle. "You don't understand," she sobbed, her words barely audible above the hum of the overhead lights. "I didn't have a choice." "We can help you," Melissa insisted, taking another slow step closer. "But you need to put that down. Now." For a moment, Catherine hesitated, her resolve wavering. Then, with a choked cry, she sank to her knees, cradling the bundle in her arms as though it were truly a child. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and for the first time, the hardened facade she'd maintained throughout the chase began to crumble. James stepped forward now, his weapon drawn but pointed downward. "Ma'am, let us handle this. Whatever you're carrying, it's too dangerous." Catherine looked up at him, her tear-streaked face filled with anguish. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered hoarsely. "They made me do it." Before anyone could respond, the faint beep of the timer inside the bundle grew louder, its red numbers ticking down with relentless precision. 30 seconds. 29. 28. Melissa's mind raced. They needed to act fast, or risk catastrophe. The corridor was eerily silent now, save for the faint beeping of the timer and Catherine's ragged sobs. Melissa stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing as she processed what to do next. Every instinct told her to act quickly, but she knew that one wrong move could escalate the situation further. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "Catherine," Melissa said softly, her voice cutting through the tension like a lifeline. "Look at me. I need you to listen carefully. Whatever's going on here, you don't have to face it alone. We can help you. But you need to trust us." Catherine's tear-filled eyes met Melissa's, searching for something, anything, that might offer her a way out. For a brief second, her grip on the bundle loosened, and Luna barked sharply, breaking the fragile stillness. The sound startled Catherine back into reality, and she clutched the bundle tighter, her body trembling uncontrollably. I didn't want to do this," Catherine choked out, her words barely audible above the relentless ticking of the timer. "They made me. They said they'd hurt my family if I didn't." Melissa exchanged a quick glance with James, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They both understood, they were dealing with someone caught in a web far bigger than herself. But time was running out. "Catherine," Melissa continued, taking another cautious step forward, "what's inside the blanket? Tell me now." Catherine hesitated, her hands shaking so violently that the bundle swayed precariously in her arms. Finally, with a strangled cry, she whispered, "It's not real, it's not real." Before anyone could react, Melissa reached out slowly, her movements deliberate and steady. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the pink blanket, and with one swift motion, she pulled it back. A collective gasp rippled through the small group of security officers gathered behind her. Beneath the blanket lay not an explosive device, but a hyper-realistic doll, its lifeless plastic features eerily convincing under the harsh fluorescent lights. The ticking sound came from a small digital timer attached to its chest, counting down toward 0. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the revelation hung heavy in the air, confusion mingling with disbelief. Melissa stared at the doll, her mind reeling as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't about terrorism, it was something else entirely. "Where's the real baby?" Melissa demanded, her voice sharp and urgent now. She stepped closer to Catherine, her gaze piercing. "What is this really about?" Catherine collapsed completely then, sinking to the floor in a heap of despair. Her shoulders shook with uncontrollable sobs as she buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." James knelt beside her, his expression grim but patient. "Start talking. Now." Through tears, Catherine began to speak, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's part of a trafficking ring, babies stolen from hospitals, sold to people overseas. They gave me this doll, to test airport security. To see how far I could get without being stopped. If I failed," she trailed off, choking on her own words. Melissa felt a chill run down her spine. Human trafficking. Babies torn away from their families, treated as commodities to be bought and sold. It was sickening, and yet somehow, it made perfect sense. The rehearsed answers, the mismatched ID, the strange behavior, it all pointed to someone operating under duress. "They threatened my son," Catherine continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd kill him. I had no choice." Melissa crouched down, placing a reassuring hand on Catherine's shoulder. "You're safe now," she said firmly. "We'll protect you, and your son. But we need names. Locations. Everything you know." Catherine nodded weakly, her resolve crumbling under the weight of exhaustion and guilt. "There's a man, he calls himself Victor. He's the one in charge. He arranges everything, the pickups, the drops. I only know bits and pieces." As Catherine spoke, James relayed the information over his radio, calling for immediate coordination with federal authorities. The stakes had just skyrocketed, they weren't dealing with a lone operative anymore. This was part of a vast, sinister network, and dismantling it would take more resources than they currently had. Luna sat quietly by Melissa's side, her ears perked up as though sensing the gravity of the moment. Melissa glanced down at her loyal partner, gratitude swelling in her chest. Without Luna's instincts, none of this would have come to light. The timer on the doll hit 10 seconds. 9. 8. Melissa grabbed it and hurled it as far down the hallway as she could, where it landed harmlessly against a locked maintenance door. When the countdown reached 0, the device emitted a single loud beep before going silent. The crisis had been averted, for now. But the battle was far from over. Catherine's confession spilled out in fragments, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and desperation. "The doll, it's just a decoy," she said, clutching at Melissa's arm as though seeking absolution. "They use them to test security measures, to see if anyone notices. But the real baby, the real one is already gone." Melissa's heart sank. She crouched lower, gripping Catherine's shoulders firmly to anchor her attention. "Where?" she demanded, her tone urgent but controlled. "Tell me where the baby is." Catherine hesitated, tears streaming down her face. "A man, his name is Harris. He took the baby hours ago. I don't know much about him, only that he works for Victor. They split up deliveries like this all the time. The doll distracts while the real child is smuggled separately." James stepped closer, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "You're telling us there's an actual infant somewhere in this airport right now?" Catherine nodded frantically, her breathing shallow and erratic. "Yes. Terminal B, he said something about a private charter flight leaving soon. They're taking the baby out of the country tonight." Melissa exchanged a sharp glance with James, both of them silently processing the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about stopping a single trafficking operation anymore, they were racing against time to save a life. "Control, this is Rodriguez," Melissa barked into her radio, her voice cutting through the static with razor-sharp clarity. "We have intel on a live human trafficking operation within the airport. A stolen infant is being transported via Terminal B, request immediate assistance and lockdown of all departures from that terminal." The response crackled back almost instantly. "Copy that, Rodriguez. Dispatching additional units to your location. Stand by for further instructions." James turned to the other officers who had gathered nearby. "Secure this hallway and detain the suspect. No one gets near her without clearance." Then, addressing Melissa, he added, "Let's move. We've got minutes, not hours." Without another word, Melissa called Luna to her side, and together, the two officers sprinted toward Terminal B. The storm outside raged on, its fury matching the chaos brewing inside the airport. Passengers milled about, oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding around them. Melissa scanned the crowd as they ran, her mind racing with possibilities. If Harris was smart, and traffickers always were, he'd blend seamlessly into the sea of travelers, making it nearly impossible to spot him. As they neared Terminal B, Melissa spotted a group of uniformed TSA agents stationed near the security checkpoint. She skidded to a halt, waving them over. "We're looking for a man traveling with an infant," she explained quickly. "Possibly using forged documents. Has anyone matching that description passed through here recently?" One of the agents frowned, flipping through a clipboard. "There was a guy about 20 minutes ago. Middle-aged, clean-cut, carrying a car seat. Said he was flying to Montreal on a private jet. Gate 42. Melissa's stomach tightened. Private jets meant no commercial manifests, no passenger lists to cross-reference. It was the perfect cover for someone trying to slip under the radar. Which gate exactly? And what airline? Gate 42. No airline, it's a charter flight. Registered to some company called Skyline Aviation. James cursed under his breath. That gives us maybe 10 minutes before takeoff. Let's go. They broke into a full sprint, weaving through the throng of passengers as announcements blared overhead. Luna trotted faithfully beside Melissa, her ears perked up and her nose twitching as though sensing the urgency of their mission. As they approached Gate 42, Melissa slowed slightly, scanning the area for any sign of Harris or the baby. Near the boarding lounge, a man in a dark suit stood casually by the gate counter, scrolling through his phone. In his other hand, he held a car seat, its canopy pulled low to obscure the occupant inside. Melissa's pulse quickened. That had to be him. James, she whispered, nodding discreetly toward the man. Over there. James followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. Let's do this carefully. We can't spook him. Melissa nodded, signaling for Luna to stay close. Together, they approached the man, who looked up just as they reached him. His eyes narrowed suspiciously, and he shifted the car seat slightly behind him, as though shielding it from view. Sir, Melissa said, flashing her badge. I'm Officer Rodriguez with airport security. Could you step aside for a moment? We need to verify your travel documents. The man's expression hardened, but he forced a polite smile. Of course, officer. Is there a problem? That's what we're here to find out, James interjected, his tone clipped. Mind showing us ID and the baby's travel papers? For a split second, the man hesitated. Then, without warning, he bolted, shoving past them and sprinting toward the jet bridge. Inside the car seat, a tiny cry pierced the air, a sound so small yet so unmistakably human that it sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through Melissa's veins. Stop him, she shouted, giving chase as Luna barked furiously and lunged ahead. The man was fast, but panic made his movements erratic. He stumbled once, nearly dropping the car seat, and Melissa seized the opportunity. With a burst of speed, she tackled him to the ground, sending the car seat sliding a few feet away. James arrived moments later, pinning the man down as backup officers swarmed the area. Luna stood protectively over the car seat, growling low in her throat. Melissa scrambled to her feet and knelt beside the car seat, her hands shaking as she gently lifted the canopy. Inside lay a tiny infant, wrapped snugly in a soft blue blanket. The baby whimpered softly, his wide eyes blinking up at her. It's okay, Melissa murmured, cradling the child carefully. You're safe now. The man, Harris, wasn't just fast, he was clever. As soon as Melissa and James had subdued him near Gate 42, it became clear that this wasn't going to be a simple arrest. Despite their best efforts to restrain him, Harris managed to twist free during the chaos, leaving behind the car seat with the infant inside. He bolted down the concourse, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. Melissa cursed under her breath, clutching the baby protectively against her chest. James, secure the child, she ordered, her voice firm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I'll go after Harris. Before James could respond, Luna barked sharply, already on the move. Melissa handed the infant off to James, who quickly called for medical personnel to ensure the baby's safety, then turned and sprinted after her dog. Luna's nose was low to the ground, sniffing furiously as she followed Harris's trail. Melissa trusted her partner implicitly. If anyone could track him down, it was Luna. Control, this is Rodriguez, Melissa said into her radio as she ran. Suspect fleeing toward Terminal B, repeat, suspect is armed and dangerous. Advise all units to converge on Gate 47 immediately. Security footage from nearby cameras confirmed Melissa's hunch. Harris had slipped through the throng of passengers and was now heading straight for Gate 47, a private charter flight preparing for departure. His movements were calculated, blending seamlessly into the flow of travelers. To the untrained eye, he looked like any other harried businessman rushing to catch his plane. But Melissa knew better. Every step he took was deliberate, every glance over his shoulder measured. He carried himself with an air of practiced nonchalance, but there was no mistaking the tension in his posture. This man wasn't just running, he was fighting for his freedom. Luna suddenly paused, her ears perking up as she caught a stronger whiff of Harris's scent lingering on Catherine's discarded coat, which had been hastily left behind during the earlier confrontation. Melissa knelt beside her, giving her a quick pat on the head. "Good girl," she whispered. "Find him." With renewed determination, Luna surged forward, leading Melissa through the labyrinth of terminals. Passengers glanced curiously at the officer and her dog racing past, some stepping aside while others snapped photos or videos. The storm outside continued to rage, its howling winds rattling the massive glass windows and adding an eerie backdrop to the unfolding drama. Ahead, Harris reached Gate 47, where a sleek private jet waited on the tarmac. Its engines hummed softly as ground crew prepared for takeoff. Harris flashed a fake smile at the gate agent, pretending to check his watch casually. "Sorry I'm late," he said smoothly, flashing what appeared to be legitimate boarding credentials. "Got held up at security." The gate agent nodded absently, waving him through. But before Harris could step onto the jet bridge, Luna let out a sharp bark, drawing everyone's attention, including his. His eyes widened in alarm when he spotted Melissa barreling toward him, her badge raised high. "Stop right there!" Melissa shouted, her voice cutting through the noise of the terminal like a knife. "Airport security. You're under arrest." For a moment, Harris froze, his mind racing. Then, realizing escape was still possible, he bolted again, shoving past startled passengers and ducking into a nearby corridor that led to baggage handling. Melissa cursed again, signaling for backup as she and Luna gave chase once more. The narrow hallway echoed with the sound of pounding footsteps as Harris weaved through stacks of luggage carts and maintenance equipment. He was desperate now, his polished facade crumbling under the weight of his predicament. Behind him, Luna growled menacingly, her powerful legs propelling her forward with relentless precision. Melissa pushed herself harder, her lungs burning as she closed the gap between them. "Harris," she yelled, her tone sharp and commanding. "You can't outrun us. Surrender now." But Harris wasn't listening. At the end of the corridor, he spotted an emergency exit door labeled, "No unauthorized access." Without hesitation, he yanked it open, triggering a loud alarm that blared throughout the terminal. Cold air rushed in as he stumbled onto the tarmac, the storm's icy winds whipping against his face. Melissa burst through the door moments later, Luna close behind her. The open expanse of the runway stretched out before them, the private jet visible in the distance as it began taxiing toward the runway. Harris sprinted toward it, waving frantically at the pilot to stop. "Federal agents!" Melissa shouted again, raising her weapon. "Don't move." Harris ignored her, his focus solely on the jet. Just as he reached the edge of the tarmac, however, several security vehicles screeched to a halt around him, blocking his path. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, surrounding him completely. Trapped, Harris raised his hands slowly, defeat etched across his face. Melissa approached cautiously, her breathing heavy but controlled. "It's over," she said firmly, holstering her weapon. "On your knees. Now." As Harris complied, Luna stood by Melissa's side, her piercing gaze fixed unwaveringly on the trafficker. The storm raged on above them, but for the first time that night, there was a sense of closure, and justice served. The storm howled mercilessly as Harris stood frozen on the tarmac, his hands raised halfway in surrender. His eyes darted wildly between Melissa, the surrounding officers, and the private jet now idling a few hundred feet away. For a moment, it seemed like he might comply, his shoulders slumping slightly in defeat. But then, with a sudden burst of desperation, Harris reached into his coat and pulled out a small handgun. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. "I'll shoot." Melissa froze, her hand instinctively moving toward her own weapon. Behind her, Luna growled low and menacingly, her body coiled like a spring ready to strike. The tension in the air was electric, every breath visible in the icy wind as the standoff unfolded. "Put the gun down, Harris," Melissa commanded, her voice calm but firm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You're surrounded. There's no way out." Harris shook his head frantically, his grip tightening on the weapon. "You don't understand. If I go down, so does everyone else involved. You think this ends with me? It doesn't." Melissa took a cautious step forward, her gaze locked onto his. "It ends here. Tonight. Lower your weapon, or we will take you down." For a split second, Harris hesitated, his resolve wavering. Then, with a snarl, he swung the gun toward one of the approaching officers, clearly intending to fire. But before he could pull the trigger, Luna lunged forward with a deafening bark, knocking him off balance. The gun clattered to the ground as Harris stumbled backward, tripping over a piece of luggage left abandoned on the tarmac. In an instant, multiple officers tackled him, pinning him face down against the cold asphalt. Handcuffs clicked into place as Harris struggled futilely, shouting curses that were quickly drowned out by the roar of the storm and the shouts of the security team. Melissa exhaled sharply, lowering her weapon and stepping closer. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from the chase, but from the knowledge that they had stopped something far bigger than themselves tonight. She glanced at Luna, who sat panting beside her, her tail wagging faintly in triumph. "Good girl," Melissa murmured, giving her partner a quick pat on the head. As Harris was hauled to his feet, one of the officers called out, "Rodriguez, you need to see this." He gestured toward a nearby suitcase lying open near the edge of the tarmac, its contents spilling out onto the ground. Melissa hurried over, her stomach twisting with dread. Inside the suitcase was a tiny infant, swaddled tightly in a blanket. The baby's chest rose and fell steadily, but its eyes remained closed, its breathing shallow. A small syringe lay discarded beside it, evidence of sedation used to keep the child quiet during transport. "Oh God," Melissa whispered, kneeling beside the suitcase. She carefully lifted the baby into her arms, cradling it gently. "Medic. We need medical assistance here, now." Within moments, paramedics rushed onto the scene, their equipment rattling against the chaos of the storm. They quickly assessed the infant, administering oxygen and monitoring vitals while Melissa hovered anxiously nearby. "Is the baby okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "He's stable for now," one of the medics replied, his tone reassuring. "Looks like mild sedation, nothing life-threatening. We'll get him to the hospital for further evaluation." Relief washed over Melissa as she watched them load the baby onto a stretcher. This was why she did what she did, for moments like these, when justice wasn't just about stopping criminals but saving lives. She turned back to James, who stood nearby overseeing Harris being led away in handcuffs. "We got him," James said gruffly, though there was a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "And thanks to you, and Luna, we saved that kid." Melissa nodded, glancing down at her loyal partner once more. Luna wagged her tail proudly, her sharp instincts having played a crucial role yet again. "We couldn't have done it without her," Melissa admitted, scratching behind Luna's ears affectionately. As the storm began to subside, the airport slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Passengers who had been evacuated earlier trickled back in, unaware of the high-stakes drama that had unfolded mere yards away. Officers worked diligently to secure the area, gathering evidence and coordinating with federal agents to dismantle the trafficking ring Harris had been part of. Standing amidst the aftermath, Melissa felt a profound sense of purpose. It wasn't just about catching bad guys, it was about protecting the innocent, even when they couldn't protect themselves. And tonight, against all odds, they had succeeded. The medical team worked quickly, their movements efficient and precise as they tended to the sedated infant. The baby, wrapped snugly in a clean hospital blanket provided by the paramedics, lay quietly on a gurney, his tiny chest rising and falling steadily. Melissa stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as she watched the scene unfold. Every beep of the monitor, every reassuring nod from the medics, felt like a small victory, one step closer to ensuring this child would grow up safe and loved. "He's stable," one of the paramedics finally announced, turning to Melissa with a weary but satisfied smile. "We'll transport him to Children's Medical Center for observation, but he should recover fully." Whoever dosed him knew what they were doing, just enough to keep him quiet without causing permanent harm. Melissa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice tinged with gratitude. She glanced down at Luna, who sat faithfully by her side, her tail thumping gently against the ground. "You did good, girl. Real good." As the ambulance pulled away, its sirens silent but its lights flashing rhythmically in the stormy night, Melissa turned her attention back to the terminal. Inside, Catherine Holt sat hunched over in a holding room, her face pale and drawn. Her designer coat was draped loosely around her shoulders, but it did little to mask the weight of guilt that seemed to press down on her. Two officers stood guard outside the door, their expressions unreadable. Melissa approached cautiously, knocking lightly before stepping inside. "Catherine," she said gently, pulling up a chair across from the shaken woman. "Can we talk?" Catherine looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from hours of crying. For a moment, she hesitated, then nodded weakly. I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted any of this." "I know," Melissa replied, her tone soft but firm. "But right now, you have a chance to make things right. Tell me everything you know about Victor, Harris, and the others involved in this ring. Help us stop them." Catherine took a deep, shuddering breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them together in her lap. "It started months ago," she began haltingly. "My son, he got into trouble with some bad people. They threatened to hurt him if I didn't cooperate. At first, it was just deliveries. Packages. I didn't ask questions, I couldn't afford to. But then they started asking me to move the dolls, the decoys, and I realized what was really going on. Babies, stolen babies." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Melissa waited patiently, giving her time to compose herself. When Catherine finally looked up again, there was a flicker of determination in her tear-filled eyes. "Victor, he's the one in charge. He runs the whole operation. Harris is just a pawn, like me. But there are others, buyers, smugglers, corrupt officials. They're everywhere." Melissa leaned forward slightly, her pen poised over a notepad. "Names," she urged. "Locations. Anything you can give us." Catherine nodded, taking another shaky breath. "There's a warehouse near downtown Dallas. That's where they bring the babies before shipping them out. And there's a man, an attorney named Gerald Pratt. He helps launder the money, sets up fake adoptions overseas. Victor trusts him completely." Every detail Catherine revealed painted a clearer picture of the sprawling network they were dealing with, a web of greed and exploitation that stretched far beyond the confines of the airport. Melissa jotted down each name and location, her mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just a single arrest or rescue mission anymore, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Outside the holding room, James Dawkins listened intently through the cracked door, his expression grim but focused. As Melissa emerged a short while later, he turned to her with a nod. "Good work," he said gruffly. "We've already alerted the FBI and Homeland Security. With this intel, we might finally be able to dismantle the entire operation." Melissa exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. The adrenaline rush of the past few hours was beginning to wear off, leaving behind a deep exhaustion, but also a profound sense of purpose. "Let's hope so," she murmured. "No more stolen babies. No more families torn apart." James placed a hand on her shoulder, his usual cynicism softened by the gravity of the moment. "You saved that kid tonight, Rodriguez. And thanks to you and Luna, we've got a shot at taking these bastards down for good." As the two officers walked back toward the main terminal, the storm outside had finally begun to subside. The wind no longer howled quite so fiercely, and patches of starlight peeked through breaks in the clouds. It was as if the world itself was exhaling after the chaos of the evening. Melissa glanced down at Luna, who trotted happily beside her, seemingly unfazed by the long night. "What do you think, girl?" she asked with a tired smile. "Ready to go home?" Luna barked once, her tail wagging enthusiastically. Melissa chuckled softly, scratching behind her ears. "Yeah, me too." The morning light filtered through the windows of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, casting long shadows across the now quiet terminal. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp chill in the air that seemed to mirror the somber mood lingering among the passengers and staff. For Melissa Rodriguez, however, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served, or at least, the first steps toward it. Harris and Catherine were led away in handcuffs, their faces pale and drawn as they disappeared into separate squad cars. Harris glared straight ahead, his jaw clenched tightly, while Catherine kept her head bowed, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She glanced back once, her eyes meeting Melissa's for a fleeting moment. There was no anger in her gaze, only regret and something resembling gratitude. Melissa nodded slightly, acknowledging the unspoken understanding between them. Catherine had made a terrible choice, but she'd also helped set things right. That counted for something. Inside the hospital, the infant was finally reunited with his parents, a young couple who had spent hours frantically searching for their missing child after reporting a brazen abduction from a local park earlier that day. When Melissa arrived at the hospital to check on the baby, she found the family huddled together in a private room, their faces illuminated by a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "He's going to be okay," the doctor assured them gently, patting the father's shoulder before stepping out of the room. "Just keep an eye on him for the next few days, and he'll bounce back like nothing happened." The mother clutched her son tightly to her chest, rocking him softly as though afraid he might vanish again. Her husband wrapped his arms around both of them, his voice trembling as he whispered words of thanks to anyone within earshot. Melissa stood quietly in the doorway, giving them space but unable to look away. It was moments like these, the raw, unfiltered joy of reunion, that reminded her why she chose this line of work. "Officer Rodriguez?" The father approached her hesitantly, his eyes red-rimmed but filled with emotion. "Thank you. If it weren't for you, I don't even want to think about what could have happened." Melissa shook her head modestly, offering a small smile. "It wasn't just me. My partner here played a big part." She gestured to Luna, who sat obediently by her side, her tail wagging lazily. The couple knelt down to pet her, their gratitude spilling over onto the dog who had helped save their child. "You're amazing," the mother said, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to stroke Luna's head. "Both of you are heroes." As they returned to their son, Melissa stepped back into the hallway, leaning against the wall with a heavy sigh. The adrenaline rush of the night had faded completely, replaced by a deep weariness that settled into her bones. But it was a good kind of tired, the kind that came from knowing you'd made a difference. Luna sat beside her, tilting her head curiously as if sensing her handler's thoughts. Melissa chuckled softly, scratching behind her ears. "You know, girl, sometimes I wonder how you do it," she mused aloud, her voice soft and reflective. "How do you always know when something's wrong? How do you pick up on things the rest of us miss?" Luna barked once, as if to say, "That's my job." Melissa smiled, shaking her head. Yeah, I get it. You're just that good." She paused, gazing down the empty corridor as memories of the night replayed in her mind, the chase, the standoff, the moment she realized the doll wasn't real. "But seriously, Luna, without you, none of this would have happened. You saved that baby tonight. And honestly, You probably saved me too. Her thoughts drifted to the countless cases they'd worked together, each one reinforcing the bond they shared. Luna wasn't just a service dog, she was a partner, a confidant, and, at times, a lifeline. Melissa couldn't imagine doing this job without her. As they walked back to their patrol vehicle, the sun breaking through the clouds painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. The airport buzzed faintly in the distance, slowly returning to its usual rhythm. Passengers hurried to catch flights, unaware of the drama that had unfolded mere hours ago. Life moved on, but for Melissa, the events of the night would linger long after the details faded from public memory. She opened the car door and helped Luna climb inside, settling into the driver's seat with a contented sigh. As she started the engine, she glanced at her loyal companion one last time. "Ready to go home, girl?" Luna barked enthusiastically, resting her chin on the console between them. Melissa laughed softly, pulling out of the parking lot and heading toward the horizon. They'd done their part, for now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But for today, justice had prevailed, and that was enough. The days following the events at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport unfolded like a whirlwind. Armed with the intel provided by Catherine Holt and corroborated by evidence gathered during Harris's arrest, federal authorities launched a sweeping operation targeting the human trafficking ring led by Victor and his accomplices. Raids were conducted simultaneously across multiple cities: Dallas, Chicago, Miami, and even Montreal, where Gerald Pratt's law firm served as a front for laundering money tied to the illegal adoptions. Melissa watched the news reports from her living room late one evening, Luna curled up comfortably at her feet. The screen displayed footage of agents storming warehouses filled with cribs and baby supplies, arresting key members of the network. In another clip, an attorney named Gerald Pratt was seen being escorted out of his high-rise office in handcuffs, his tailored suit now rumpled and stained with sweat. It was surreal to think that the chaos Melissa had helped uncover at the airport had unraveled something so vast, so insidious. This morning, the anchor announced, federal officials revealed details of a major bust involving an international human trafficking operation specializing in stolen infants. Authorities credit quick thinking and sharp instincts, particularly those of K-9 officer Melissa Rodriguez and her service dog, Luna, for exposing the scheme. Melissa chuckled softly, shaking her head as she reached down to scratch Luna behind the ears. "See, girl? You're famous now." Luna wagged her tail lazily, clearly unimpressed by the idea of fame but happy for the attention nonetheless. The report continued, showing snippets of interviews with passengers who had witnessed parts of the incident. One woman described Luna's ferocious barking during the chase, while another recounted how Melissa had tackled Harris on the tarmac. The segment ended with praise for airport security's swift response, highlighting the critical role played by Melissa and her partner in saving not only the infant but potentially countless others caught in the trafficking web. By the time Melissa returned to work the next day, word had spread throughout the department. Colleagues greeted her with congratulatory pats on the back and nods of respect. Even Supervisor Martin Nez, usually skeptical of anything involving Luna, approached her with a rare smile. "Good job out there, Rodriguez," he said gruffly, though there was genuine admiration in his tone. "You too, Luna." "Thank you, sir," Melissa replied, keeping her expression humble despite the pride swelling in her chest. "But it wasn't just us. Everyone worked together to make this happen." Her humility didn't go unnoticed. Later that afternoon, Chief Anderson called her into his office. He gestured for her to sit, then leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "Rodriguez, I'll cut to the chase. Your actions last week demonstrated exceptional skill, dedication, and leadership. We're promoting you to senior K-9 officer effective immediately." Melissa blinked, caught off guard by the announcement. "Sir, thank you. I'm honored. But honestly, none of this would have been possible without Luna." Chief Anderson nodded, glancing fondly at the German shepherd lounging patiently by Melissa's side. "I know. And we're making sure Luna gets recognized too. She's already become something of a local hero." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Still, don't sell yourself short. You trusted your instincts, and hers, and because of that, lives were saved. That's what leadership looks like." Melissa felt a lump rise in her throat. She'd always known Luna was extraordinary, but hearing their partnership praised so openly meant more than she could put into words. "Thank you, Chief," she said quietly. "I promise to keep doing my best, for the team, for the airport, and for every passenger who walks through those doors." As she left the office, several officers clapped her on the shoulder, offering congratulations once again. Melissa smiled politely but kept walking, eager to get back to her routine. Promotions were nice, headlines were flattering, but what mattered most to her was the work itself. Every day brought new challenges, new opportunities to protect people. And as long as she had Luna by her side, she knew they could handle whatever came their way. Later that evening, Melissa took Luna for a long walk around the neighborhood. The air was crisp, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. As they strolled past quiet suburban homes, Melissa found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. The case had tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated, forcing her to confront the darker corners of humanity. But it had also reaffirmed her belief in the power of teamwork, trust, and instinct. "You know," she said aloud, glancing down at Luna, "sometimes I wonder if I'd be half the officer I am without you." "Probably not." She laughed softly, giving the dog's leash a gentle tug. "So here's to us, huh? Partners till the end." Luna barked in agreement, her tail wagging furiously as they turned onto their street. Ahead, the lights of home twinkled warmly against the gathering dusk. For Melissa, the future felt uncertain yet hopeful. There would always be criminals to catch, injustices to fight, but tonight, all she wanted was to savor the moment. Together, she and Luna had made a difference. And tomorrow, they'd do it all over again. The weeks following the bust of Victor's trafficking ring brought a wave of public awareness that rippled far beyond Dallas. News outlets across the country covered the story extensively, shining a spotlight on the grim reality of human trafficking, a crime often hidden in plain sight. Melissa found herself invited to speak at community forums and interviews, where she shared not only the details of the case but also an urgent message for the public. Human trafficking isn't something that happens somewhere else, she explained during one televised interview, her voice steady and impassioned. It happens here, in our airports, our neighborhoods, even our parks. And it thrives because we don't always know what to look for. Behind her, footage played of Luna in action, barking fiercely at Catherine Holt, sprinting through the terminal, and standing protectively over the suitcase containing the sedated infant. The camera lingered on Luna's alert expression, capturing the intelligence and determination that made her such an invaluable partner. "Luna taught us all a lesson," Melissa continued, glancing down at the dog sitting obediently by her side. "Sometimes, danger isn't obvious. Sometimes, it looks like something as innocent as a sleeping baby or a well-dressed traveler. But if something feels off, if your instincts tell you to take a closer look, don't ignore it. Speak up. Report it. You could save a life." Her words resonated deeply with viewers, sparking conversations about vigilance and responsibility. Social media campaigns emerged, urging people to learn the signs of trafficking. Individuals who appear overly controlled by someone else, lack identification documents, or exhibit signs of physical abuse or fear. Hotline numbers were shared widely, encouraging citizens to report suspicious activity anonymously. Back at the airport, life had returned to its usual rhythm, but with subtle changes. Security protocols were tightened, particularly around areas prone to high traffic like terminals and baggage claims. Training sessions emphasized the importance of observing passenger behavior and trusting gut instincts. Officers began patrolling in pairs more frequently, their K-9 units playing a central role in maintaining safety. For Melissa, the aftermath of the case was bittersweet. While she was proud of the impact they'd made, she couldn't shake the knowledge that there were still countless victims out there, people trapped in shadows, waiting for someone to notice them. It was a sobering reminder of how much work remained to be done. One afternoon, as she walked through the K-9 training facility with Luna, Melissa paused to watch a group of new recruits undergoing evaluation. Among them was a young Belgian Malinois named Max, his sleek coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He darted between obstacles with remarkable speed and precision, his handler struggling to keep up. There was something about Max, an eagerness, a sharpness, that reminded Melissa of Luna when they first started working together. "You've got your eye on him, don't you?" James Dawkins said, appearing beside her with a knowing smirk. His grizzled face softened as he glanced at Luna, who sat patiently nearby. "Not replacing her anytime soon, I hope." Melissa laughed softly, shaking her head. "Never. But Luna won't be able to do this forever. She deserves a break, and so does Max. He's got potential." James nodded thoughtfully. "He's good. Smart, loyal, and fast. Just like his predecessor." He gestured toward Luna, who tilted her head curiously at the mention of her name. "Think he'll live up to her legacy?" Melissa smiled, her gaze lingering on Max as he executed a perfect sniff test, locating a hidden scent within seconds. With the right partner, absolutely. Over the next few weeks, Melissa began integrating Max into their routine. At first, Luna seemed skeptical of the newcomer, keeping a cautious distance whenever he bounded too close. But as the days passed, the two dogs formed an unlikely bond. Luna took on the role of mentor, guiding Max through complex exercises and teaching him the nuances of airport security work. Watching them together filled Melissa with a sense of pride, not just in Luna's patience, but in Max's eagerness to learn. By the time Max officially joined the team, Luna had earned a well-deserved retirement. Melissa made sure to honor her partner's legacy, ensuring that every new recruit understood the standards set by the legendary German Shepherd. On her last day of active duty, Melissa threw a small celebration at the station, complete with treats for Luna and heartfelt speeches from colleagues. To Luna, Chief Anderson said, raising a glass of sparkling water. "The best damn K-9 officer this department has ever seen. We owe her, and you, a debt we can never repay." Melissa blinked back tears, scratching Luna behind the ears as the room erupted in applause. "Thank you, everyone," she said quietly. "But let's not forget, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning, for Max, for me, and for all of us. There are still lives to save." As the sun set over Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport later that evening, Melissa stood outside with Luna and Max by her side. The horizon blazed with fiery hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the tarmac. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, almost serene. "You ready for tomorrow, girl?" Melissa asked, kneeling to wrap her arms around Luna's neck. The dog licked her cheek affectionately, her tail wagging slowly. "And you, Max? Think you can handle it?" Max barked enthusiastically, prancing in circles as if eager to prove himself. Melissa laughed, standing up and giving both dogs a final pat before heading inside. Together, they would continue the fight, for justice, for safety, and for every person whose voice had been silenced. The screen faded to black, then slowly brightened into a montage of moments that captured the heart and soul of Melissa Rodriguez's journey with Luna, and now, Max. There she was, walking through the bustling terminal at dawn, her boots clicking against the tiled floor as passengers streamed past in every direction. Luna trotted confidently by her side, her nose twitching as she scanned the crowd with practiced precision. Behind them trailed Max, his youthful energy evident in the way he bounded forward, eager to prove himself but still learning to match Luna's calm professionalism. The scene shifted to a quiet moment later that evening. Melissa sat on a bench near Gate 17, watching as Luna rested her head on Melissa's lap, her eyes half closed in contentment. Max lay sprawled nearby, panting softly after a long day of training. The airport hummed faintly around them, its endless activity softened by the golden glow of sunset streaming through the massive windows. It was a rare pause in an otherwise relentless routine, a moment of connection between handler, mentor, and protégé. Next came footage of Melissa speaking at a community event, standing before a packed auditorium filled with concerned citizens. Her words were firm yet compassionate, her tone carrying the weight of experience without ever losing its humanity. Human trafficking isn't just some distant problem, she said, her voice resonating clearly through the room. It's happening right here, in our cities, our neighborhoods, even our airports. But together, we can fight it. Together, we can stop it. The camera panned to the audience, where faces reflected a mixture of shock, determination, and hope. Parents clutched their children closer, teenagers exchanged thoughtful glances, elderly couples nodded solemnly. In the front row, a young woman wiped tears from her eyes, clutching a flyer with hotline numbers printed boldly across it. On-screen text appeared briefly, *, know the signs. Report suspicious behavior. Save a life. *. Back at the airport, the montage transitioned to scenes of everyday heroism. A baggage handler noticed a passenger acting strangely and flagged down security. An airline attendant discreetly alerted authorities about a traveler whose story didn't add up. And there was Melissa, kneeling beside Luna as the dog sniffed out contraband hidden deep within a suitcase, another potential tragedy averted because someone paid attention. Finally, the screen showed Melissa standing alone on the tarmac one last time, silhouetted against the vast expanse of sky painted in shades of twilight. Luna sat proudly at her side, while Max stood slightly behind, his ears perked and his tail wagging steadily. For a brief moment, everything else faded away, the noise of the terminal, the roar of planes taking off, the constant buzz of human activity. All that remained was the bond between handler and dogs, forged not just by duty but by trust, loyalty, and love. Melissa turned to face the camera, her expression warm yet resolute. "Every day, we have a choice," she began, her voice steady and clear. "We can look away when something feels wrong, or we can step up. We can speak out. We can make a difference. Because the truth is, no one fights alone. Whether you're a K-9 officer like me, a flight attendant, a baggage handler, or just someone passing through this airport, you have the power to change someone's life." The screen cut to text overlaying images of ordinary people making extraordinary choices, reporting suspicious behavior, volunteering with anti-trafficking organizations, supporting survivors. Beneath each image, the message repeated, *, stay vigilant. Stay aware. Together, we can end human trafficking. *. As the video drew to a close, Melissa knelt down to hug Luna tightly, whispering something only the dog could hear. Max barked playfully, nudging her arm until she laughed and scratched him behind the ears. The final shot lingered on all three of them, framed by the sprawling runway and endless Texas sky. A single line of text appeared across the screen, bold and unmissable. *, if you see something, say something. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-373-7888. *. The screen faded to black once more, leaving viewers with a sense of purpose, and a call to action they couldn't ignore. At its core, this story is about more than just a high-stakes chase through an airport or the bravery of a K-9 officer and her dog. It's about trust, trusting your instincts, trusting others, and trusting that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, there is always hope. Melissa Rodriguez didn't set out to be a hero. She was simply doing her job, relying on her training and the bond she shared with Luna to protect the people around her. But in that dedication, she uncovered something far bigger than herself, a network of exploitation and greed that thrived because it stayed hidden. The lesson here isn't just for law enforcement or airport security, it's for all of us. Human trafficking exists not because we don't care, but because it hides in plain sight. It thrives on silence, on our hesitation to speak up when something feels off. The truth is, you don't have to wear a badge or carry a weapon to make a difference. You just have to pay attention. That uneasy feeling you get when someone's behavior seems out of place. Don't ignore it. That nagging suspicion that something isn't right? Trust it. Because every tip matters, every report counts, and every action has the potential to save a life. Melissa and Luna remind us that heroes aren't born, they're made by the choices they make every single day. And those choices don't have to be grand gestures. Sometimes, it's as simple as noticing what others overlook. So, let this story be a wake-up call. Educate yourself. Learn the signs. Be the person who steps forward when everyone else steps back. Together, we can dismantle the systems that prey on the vulnerable and build a safer world for everyone. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or feel, or want to take action, we need your help to keep sharing these kinds of powerful narratives. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another gripping tale like this one. Hit the notification bell, because every new video will bring you closer to understanding the real-world challenges and triumphs shaping our communities. Share this story with your friends, your family, and anyone who needs to hear it. The fight against injustice starts with awareness, and awareness starts with you. Thank you for watching, and for caring. Let's keep the conversation going, one story at a time.